Thank you for watching this teaching video from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. Please subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. Our mission is to help people come to know Jesus better and love Him more every day. We believe that this will not only help our own spiritual growth, but also help us better influence our communities and world for Christ. For more information about Oak Tree, please visit our website at oaktreechurch.com, where you'll find past message series, online giving options, and more information about our discipleship process we call The Path. We'd love to hear from you in the comments or through our website contact form. Now, please enjoy this message.
All right. Well, we get a bonus Sunday in January this year. It's our fifth Sunday, but we skipped the first Sunday, so we actually are right on track. Each year, we do what we call the State of the Church. Of course, play off of the State of the Union. Our Constitution, our U.S. Constitution requires that from time to time the President address Congress and give the state of our Union, what's going on. And of course, over the years, it's gotten not just here's where we're at, but also here's the agenda that I want to accomplish. And I expect all 535 of you out there to step in line, and half stands up and claps and half just sits there with a frown, and depending on who's in the White House at any given time, the halves change, right? And the Supreme Court justices who attend, they all sit there in their black robes and just completely stoic, don't have, because they're supposed to be nonpartisan, non-political. So whether they like something or not, they just sit there. A lot of times just hands folded in their lap. They don't clap. They don't cheer. Rarely do they stand up until the end. So this morning, I don't want you to be Supreme Court justices, okay, that are just sitting there, stoic-faced, okay, whatever. Because the state of our church is not so much like, I'm the president, here's the agenda that I'm going to push. It's a time, according to our church constitution, to celebrate what God has done in the previous year and look forward to what could be coming in the following year. So it's similar to the U.S. State of the Union, but it's got some differences as well. And I like doing this on a Sunday morning. Now, normally, we would have more people here on a Sunday morning, but given, in this case, both the virus and the weather, it's just sort of one of those things that, packs together. But we're definitely grateful for those of you who are joining online, whether you're a regular part of our church, whether you're joining for the first time. We're really glad that you're a part and get to hear what's going on here. We don't stick this in a back room in a business meeting where only 3 people are going to show up and just sort of think it's not important. This is a big deal, and I really enjoy being able to do the State of the Church each year. So let's before we get to 2020, let's back up even further. Because this is an important year. 2021 is going to be an important year for our church. Because this November, we will turn 70 years old. We have 70 years of ministry on the west side of South Bend here, Indiana. And so I'd like to start today by talking about oak trees. I like oak trees. Usually big. You can climb oak trees. I think we have a picture of an oak tree here somewhere. We have a picture of hey, there's an oak tree. Sun shining through it, beautiful. Don't you miss that? Grass, well, yeah, and you're the mountains, right? But just the sun, the clear sky. It's cloudy in there, but you can see the blue and the sun shining through the oak tree. And that oak actually looks like it's perfect for climbing, doesn't it? Just get on up that thing, and I like oak trees, and I like the fact that that oak tree is our name, part of our name. But it wasn't always that way. Over 70 years, we've had a history of being both independent and denominational. For the first 8 or 9 years of our church's history, we were an independent community Bible church. We were just a Bible church. I don't know if community got too long, so they just slashed it, and just a Bible church. And then we joined a Baptist denomination, one of the Baptist groups, and we were Baptist for a long time. And then 17 years ago, we went independent again and changed our name to Oak Tree Community Church. And we're not the only one. Here in the States, I think there are at least 6 Oak Tree Community Churches, and email and websites usually get mixed up a little bit. Somebody lands on our website and sends a connection card, and somebody's 17 years is blowing your mind. Yes. The year was 2004. We'll get there. The year was 2004. And we changed our name to Oak Tree Community Church. Little did we know, I didn't know at that point that we were going to be one of many. But there's one in California, there's one in Missouri, there's one in Florida, and a couple others sprinkled throughout. So we've got oak trees all over the country. And sometimes there have been times, definitely, even recently, somebody found our website. They're just looking for Oak Tree Church. And so they get to oaktreechurch.com, and there it is. It says Oak Tree Community Church. And so they send a message, I missed the study this week. I'm like, you must be thinking about the other Oak Tree, church. And so, we help them straighten that out. But yeah, 17 years ago. The thing about Oak Tree, I was at a conference. I have to tell you the story behind it. I was at a conference in 2002, actually, I think, and it took about 1.5 years before we made the change. And I was just doodling. I don't remember what session it was, but apparently I was bored. I was doodling in my notebook, and this thing that kept coming back to my mind over and over and over was Oak Tree, Oak Tree, Oak Tree. And so I'm doodling, I'm playing with calligraphy and fonts and everything. Obviously bored in that session. And there was Oak Tree Community, and there was Oak Tree Fellowship, and there was Oak Tree just Church, and Oak Tree. What if we joined another denomination, say Baptist or another, and just all of these ideas. And I love the idea. There's a ton of great picture and imagery behind an oak tree. Oak trees, fun facts. Oak trees are some of the longest living trees out there, right? In the United States alone, there is one oak tree that they say is upwards to 13,000 years old. Now, I'm not sure exactly, but let's give it thousands of years. Hundreds of years is a middle-age oak tree, okay? So 70 years is not an old oak tree at all. All right, we're 70 years old. We're not an old oak tree. We've got lots of room to grow. We've got lots of time to grow. We're not quite an acorn anymore, but we're growing up. We're starting to get into our teenage years here, but we've got potentially hundreds of years available ahead of us if we follow the trajectory of a physical oak tree, and of course, if Jesus doesn't come back before then. But we became Oak Tree Community Church, and there was one thing that I could not get past as I was doing my doodling in the conference. And that was that a church, and of course Christians, are supposed to bear fruit. And we find that terminology in Scripture, bear fruit. And oak trees don't bear fruit. They bear nuts. And I couldn't get past that, right? A little acorn. And I was talking with one of the conference speakers at a break, and I just sort of tossed this idea because he was actually talking about bearing fruit and everything, and making big steps in your church and whatever. And I said, here's this thing, wrestling around with this idea of a name change and going independent again. And the problem is I love Oak Tree, but oak trees don't bear fruit, they bear nuts. And he said, that's okay, because most churches are full of nuts anyway, right? And he said, and I'm not talking about the deluxe, only cashews, or only, I'm going to Brazil nuts, or only, whatever. He said most churches are like those big, Costco or Sam's Club ginormous cans of mixed nuts, right? That are mostly peanuts. He said that's how most churches are. He said it's okay because they still have value and they still have purpose and meaning, and you can still accomplish what God wants you to accomplish. And I'm like, that's a sign. That's a sign. He said I could. So if I'm not going to tell you his name, he's a popular speaker, but we'll blame him. If you don't like the name and we don't like, we'll blame him. 17 years ago, we finally made that shift. We became independent again, and we became Oak Tree Community Church. One of the great things about oak trees is that if you look on ancient maps, almost always you'll find an oak tree as a landmark. There's also, sometimes there's this big boulder, turn left at the boulder. Okay, but a lot of times there's an oak tree somewhere on there. You get that, you see the oak tree out there and just keep on going. Because if you could find the oak tree, you could find your way. And I love that visual. I love that picture. And for 17 years, we've been Oak Tree Community Church, and that is the type of church that we want to be. If you can find the oak tree, you can find your way. Spiritually, in this case, not just on a map. And there were two verses that really stood out that said that used this concept of a tree that became sort of the foundational verses for our church and for our name. And they are Psalm 1, the first Psalm, verse 3, and then the second half of Isaiah 61:3. Psalm 1:3 says this, talking about the righteous man who does not follow after the path of sinners and all that, but instead finds pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. He is like a tree planted. Now I love this because the tree doesn't plant itself. The tree is planted there for a purpose, right? He is like the righteous person is like a tree planted by flowing streams. It yields its fruit at the proper time. Means that there's not always necessarily going to be fruit showing. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be the same amount of fruit showing, but the right fruit at the right time, dependent on somebody else's plan. Its leaves never fall off, and he succeeds in everything he attempts because he's delighting in the law of the Lord. Like, man, that is the type of church we want to be. A church planted here, full of people who are delighting in God's commands, delighting in God's laws, like a flowing stream, or like a tree planted by a flowing stream. And what we attempt for God can succeed as long as we're doing it according to His way, which is in the context. And then the other verse was Isaiah chapter 61. Now, the context here is the coming of Messiah to reclaim Israel, His chosen people, as He ushers them into the kingdom, which is still future. And so there's this whole list of things in verses 1, 2, and the first half of verse 3 that Messiah is going to do. And I know this is about Israel, but I love the picture here in Isaiah 61:3, and I think there's a general principle that we can use. They will be called oaks of righteousness, trees planted by the Lord to reveal His splendor. Maybe your translation says to reveal His glory, for His own glory. I love the idea that we can be a church planted here on the west side of South Bend, planted by the Lord Himself, to bear the fruit at the proper time, the right fruit at the right time, and to reveal God's glory in everything that we do. That's the type of church that we want to be. That is the concept behind Oak Tree Community Church. And we've been doing that to the best of our ability now for 70 years, and we don't want to stop. Now, I haven't been, in fact, none of us have been here for 70 years. There's not a single one of our original members here in this church anymore. And that's awesome. That's very cool because it didn't die with the original generation. We're multiple generations down, and we're looking forward to multiple generations in the future. And so our theme this year is going to be 70 and beyond, because our anniversary is in November. So we have to go through almost the entire year to get to that number and then work into next year, 2022. So 70 and beyond is the way we want to think this year. So let's go back now. That's history. Let's go back just 1 year and think about 2020 and see what happened there. And you can't talk about 2020 without, number one, the COVID effect. I'm calling it the COVID effect. Can't talk about 2020 without the COVID effect. Obviously, that had an impact on our church and a lot of other churches and businesses, and every family has been impacted in one way or another. But in our church specifically, it obviously has decreased our in-person engagement. There's no doubt. This time last year, there were more people in this room and fewer people online. And the reason for that is because we didn't even have online yet at this time last year. We were recording our messages and putting them onto the website, but we didn't have a live stream. We didn't have any of that going on. And so had that happened, this time last year, we would not have been ready for it. And so I think that there's a lot of God's grace and providence that we do see over the course of last year, even under the COVID effect. We were closed for a couple of months in March and April and into May a little bit, 7-8 weeks. And since then, we've watched very carefully. We've had some weeks where it was very, I think we closed the building, but still did online. There are some times that we've actually just closed because of sickness. One of the great praises this year, and I think this is something that we would be remiss if we did not mention, is that to the best of my knowledge, although we've had some people who have contracted COVID and they've been sick and recovered, not a single one of our members have died because of COVID. That is a praise right there. Even if nothing else, even if we look at last year and say everything else went badly and everything else was wrong, which it didn't, that right there is a huge praise. And we don't want to miss that. God was gracious as He looked over our church and our church family. And even though some of us did get sick, we didn't lose a single member to this virus. And that can't be said. I have a lot of friends in a lot of other churches that cannot say that as they do their own state of the churches or whatever they do. There are a lot of funerals in a lot of churches as friends of mine buried longtime members, short-term members, friends of theirs, family members because of this thing. And we are so grateful that that was one thing that did not impact our church. But even though we had decreased in-person attendance or decreased in-person engagement, we had increased online engagement. Like I said, we didn't even have an online presence from a live stream last year. And but because that was already our goal, we were already thinking in that direction, and we had started to collect equipment and start working on equipment so that we could record, it did not take us very long to be able to switch to live stream. Now, to be sure, it was not good. There's no doubt. If anybody was watching at the very beginning, it was not good. And there are still some parts that are absolutely not as good as they could be. We know that. We know that. But I also know churches that are still, after almost a year of this, have no online presence at all. They're still shut down. They have no in-person presence. They have no online presence. And many, many churches, our size, small churches like ours, even larger churches, closed last year. Hundreds and thousands of churches closed down. And for some reason, again, God in His grace, and I like to talk about God's infinite wisdom. Sometimes His infinite wisdom just baffles us, right? Why are we still here? I have no idea. I have no idea why God in His grace and in His wisdom said Oak Tree is not going to be one of those places that closes in 2020. I don't know. Obviously, there's still work for us to do. Instead of this place closing and our assets going somewhere else and our people going somewhere else and we never see each other again or whatever. That's not the case for us, but it has been for a lot of other churches across the country and across the world, by the way, too. Now, some people haven't come back in person yet. There are some of you who are online this morning. You haven't seen this building for almost a year. Some of you haven't left your house more than you needed to. Thank God for curbside delivery and Amazon and some of these other things that bring stuff to us, right? Because whether you're concerned about compromised immune systems or somebody in your family or in your household, you don't want them to get sick. I understand that. Okay? Perfectly understandable. We get that. But you haven't been here, maybe you haven't been out of your house for a long time, and you're just trying to stay safe. I'm glad that in 2020 we were able to get to the point where we can come to you and you don't have to come to us all the time. I think that's a blessing, and we were able to do that. And so our online engagement and participation has gone up dramatically, and we're grateful. On any given Sunday, by the way, some of you don't know these statistics or whatever, but on any given Sunday, on an average Sunday, now today's a little bit lower because of weather and some other stuff, but on an average Sunday right now, we have about 1/3 of our attendance is online and 2/3 is in the room, in the building here. Okay, rough numbers. So, in addition, now here's a cool thing. I love this. In addition to you in the room and those of you who are online who are already a part of our church, we've had an increase in new participation from people who were not originally or were not part of our church before this thing started last year. We got the online, the live stream and everything, and we've got people from all over this country and different places around the world who are part of our church here on Sunday morning who would never be a part of our church if it were not for the online attendance. We have people on the West Coast, we have people in the South, and many times, and some of these are my personal friends who have no good churches around. They have no churches within a decent driving distance of their home. No good churches, no solid Bible teaching churches. The churches are whatever doctrinally, and they're like, we just can't go there. And they find Oak Tree Community Church online on Sunday mornings. And I love that. I think that's awesome. And even though you never meet them, you never see them, you're online this morning. If you're online this morning or you're watching the recording a little bit later, we're glad that you're a part of our church, even though many of you we've never even met in person. But we're glad that it reminds us that the church, not just Oak Tree Church, but the church is bigger than just one tiny location, one small group. We are a family, brothers and sisters in Christ, and we get to serve each other in this way. And increased influence that we get to have in the church global. So I think that's awesome. So the COVID effect is not just a negative, people aren't coming to church anymore. The COVID effect has actually pushed us forward in ways that we wanted to go anyway. And it has broadened our influence here out of South Bend. And I just think that's fantastic. And that's worth celebrating. Even though when we usually think of COVID, we think of it in a negative way. There has been some positive stuff that has come out of it. A second thing that has come out of actually sort of springboards out of the COVID effect, the second part of our review this morning, is that in the state of Indiana, there was a tech grant that was made available to churches through the Center for Congregations. And it was, I think we got the bullet point there, it was $5,000 for this tech grant. And I know a lot of churches got this grant to buy technology, to upgrade their technology because of the decrease in in-person, so that we were able to get that grant. And there was a matching funds. There had to be at least 10% matching, and so we gave toward that, and we were able to upgrade our technology, which is one of the ways that we got better. For our initial live stream was on some technology that was not meant for live stream, and we got the grant, and we were able to invest in some technology. Some of the stuff you can see, some of it, if you walk through, some of it you can't see. It's hidden. It's just sort of part of the overall infrastructure, but we were able to get that. And since we wanted to live stream anyway, that helped us, push forward in that way and helped us do that a little bit quicker. We also, now this isn't technically part of the grant itself, but since we're talking about finances a little bit, we also in 2020 spent some money, mostly out of our savings, which is, it's why you have savings, right? Mostly out of our savings, we were able to spend money to upgrade our facilities in some ways that really needed it. We've been in this building now for a little over 8 years, okay? And but the building itself is over 30 years old, and so there was some stuff that really needed to be done. And Steve broke one of our gutters, and so we had to replace that. And it's true though. It's true. I mean, the other things that went up, were a part of that. And glad that you're walking with a cane, and you're doing much better, even though it's been a long time. I know it's been a long time, but it's really good that you're really. That's awesome. Walked Sylvia down the aisle without the cane yesterday. That's very cool. You were able to lean on her, right? She would normally be on this side, but I needed her on this side, so I could. That's awesome. That's very cool. We did replace some gutters this year because it needed to be done. We replaced our roof because it needed to be done. There were holes in it. It was leaking, and it just, some other issues that it needed to be done. Put some lights on the outside of the building, and so that we have a lit up parking lot again. Like, why does that matter when it comes to a state of the church or a church in review? Because a dilapidated building has a mental and an emotional effect as much as it does a physical effect. When you show up at a building that's not being maintained, or when people see a building that's not being maintained, there's an emotional and a mental effect that says, this place isn't going to be around long. They're not taking care of the things that they have. And of course, we want to be good managers of the things that God has allowed us to have. And so we put some money, and we invested some good money into saying, we plan to be here for a while. Right? We plan to be, I think at one point I said it was a 50-year roof. I don't think that's exactly right. I think I might have been shooting a little long there. Maybe it's not a 50-year roof, but it's still a long time. It's probably a longer roof than I care to, I'm going to have to bother. Most of us are going to have to worry about, right? So we did that. There are other things in our building that are showing their age and are going to come due, and we have to maintain that. And we want to make sure that we take care and manage well the stuff that we have, right? Because we're doing this for the glory of God, like we sang this morning. We're doing this for the glory of God, not just for ourselves. We do have a small budget, small church, small budget, just like, small income at home, small budget. That's just how it works, right? And we are spending conscious. We know what we have. And just recently, last year, I think it was either 1 year or 2 years, last year or the previous year was the first year in at least my recollection, which is a long, long time, that our spending was greater than our income. We try to not do that. We want to not have to dip into savings. But especially this last year, I can tell you, with decreased attendance, our giving went down a little bit as well. Not as bad as it could have been. Again, there were a lot of churches that just shut down, and when people stopped showing up, giving stopped showing up, and they had no funds to do anything. Even if they wanted to stay open and live stream and do all the other stuff, it just wasn't possible. And I want to say just personally, but on behalf of Gary and me both, and all of our church members, thank you for your continued giving. Thank you for your continued support in what we're doing here. We're like I said, we're spending conscious. It doesn't have to be that way, and we're hoping that we can grow that back to where it was before, where we're not dipping into savings. And so what we did, and this leads us to point 3 in our 2020 in review. What we did toward the end of last year is we spent a couple of months having some congregational meetings, and what we found is that there are some churches that just get old and get tired, right? And they're just like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I want to. This is going to be a lot of hard work to even stay open. And so they decide to not stay open. They decide to close. And if you're online, maybe you're one of the churches that, part of one of the churches that did that. Our congregation said, no, that's not what we want to do. That's not what we want to do. We want to push forward. We want to move. We want to grow. We want to do more things, to the best of our ability. And so, as we were having these congregational meetings, we were gathering for prayer and discussion and planning and some of these things. What we decided was, as we talked about what could be, and we talked about what should be, we filled up a whiteboard with ideas of things that we could do. We've still got that, by the way. We haven't had one of those meetings for a while. We've still got that whiteboard as we try to strategically plan out where we could go. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're going to continue to need input We're not going to have all of these meetings like we did, but we probably will have some more meetings, okay? And we're going to need input, and we're going to need effort. It's going to take time, and it's going to take giving, and it's going to take our hands. This is going to be an all hands on deck year. If we're going to stay open, we're going to keep pushing forward, and we're going to be 70 and beyond. We're all going to have to plug in and do our part. So what does that look like then? We're done with 2020. We are now in 2021. What does 2021 look like moving ahead? Well, again, the theme for the year is 70 and beyond. That's what we're looking for. 70 is a young oak tree. All right, we don't want to be done young, right? So we're looking forward to November, and man, I would love to have a big bash celebration, right? Hopefully all of the lockdowns and groupings and everything will be way past, and we can have everybody together. We want everybody who can be here to come and just have this big bash and just say, 70 years, that was a nice start. Let's engage in 2020. That's what we're looking for. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm looking forward to. But we have no idea what's going to happen this year. I guarantee that when I stood up here this time last year and did our State of the Church and said, this is what we want to do in 2020, it did not look like what actually happened in 2020, right? We didn't know anything about the COVID effect. We didn't know anything about everything was going to be locked down. We had no clue about any of that. And I'm not a prophet. And so I can't say, here's what 2021 is exactly going to look like. And we roll with the punches, and that's fine. But we need to remember that God is sovereign. God is gracious. And again, He has us here for a reason. We are still open. We are still here for a reason. And so we want to serve Him to the best of our ability. We want to serve each other. We want to serve our community for the best of our ability, to the best way that we know how. And biblically speaking, theologically thinking, and really just realistically, we have no guarantees from day to day anyway, right? In our homes, we have no guarantees. In our workplaces, we have no guarantees. Our church has no guarantee. Day to day, we have no idea what's coming, much less year to year. And so it's somewhat, it's not arrogant, but to be able to say, here's what we plan to do this year. I think it's wise. I think God blesses planning. I was, several years ago, I was able to be a contributor to her book on the theology of planning. And I think God does bless that. I think He does want us to have plans. I think He does want us to think through what we could do to the best of our ability. And then say, all right, God, here's what we'd like to do. What part are you going to allow us to do? Are you going to change the direction altogether like last year? And then we respond to the best way that we can. I don't know what 2021 holds. Neither do you. And so what we'd like to think is, or what we want to do is we want to say, here's what we'd like to focus on. Here's what we'd like to do this year. And then see how the year unfolds. And one of those things, our next point up here, the major area of focus that we'd like to have here in 2021 as we look forward to 70 and beyond is more outreach and community engagement as a key area of our focus. That came up in our meetings last year, and so that's one of the things that we'd like to look at. In fact, we did two things at the end of last year directly as a result of those meetings. We did a trunk or treat here on Halloween, actually, and we were able to serve. We're guessing, about 300 people came through. And as I was wandering around trying to find something to do, and I couldn't find anything to do except get in people's way because y'all had it done so well. I was just standing near the exit talking with people as they were leaving, and there were a handful of people that said, thank you so much for having this. Most of the other churches closed down. Most of the other churches shut theirs down. And it was our first time doing it, So we didn't know anybody. We didn't know we were supposed to shut down. We just went ahead and did it anyway, right? And we did it, and it went well. And we had almost 100 cars come through. And we were able to hand out to, as these families came through, we were able to hand out the Gospel of John. We were able to hand out these cards that we made up that has the gospel very clearly laid out on the back. And we've still got many of these cards left that we printed up a bunch of them that you can use in your own community engagement as we move forward in that area. We also did a Christmas caroling in a local neighborhood, and a small group of you went out and you sang and you handed out some information about the church, and just some little things. It took some planning, it took some work, but candy and singing are two pretty good things, right? So it's a good start. It's a good start, and just get some information out about our church. This year, we already have a couple of things in the works. One of them is for the next 2 weeks, Gary is going to teach on marriage, and it's right around Valentine's Day in a couple of weeks here. So he's going to teach on the full package: marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and what the Bible says about those things and relationships. And it's one of those series, very short, only 2 weeks, very easy to invite people to, invite them to say, hey, check this out online. You can watch online. You don't even have to be in the building. But again, engage with the sphere of influence that you have, because this is a need, and we need good teaching on this topic. And by the way, I'm going to take a short rabbit trail here along that same thought. One of the reasons that Gary is teaching is because I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be in Brazil, and we mentioned that during prayer time. That's not the only. I love to have other people teach, even when I'm here. But when I'm gone, obviously, love to have people teach. And I'm going to be in Brazil for the next few weeks. Praise, last week, Sarah mentioned that I had to have a negative COVID test in order to get on the plane and go. That came back negative, so that's good. And there's this nor'easter coming to the Atlantic coast, and I was supposed to be flying through Newark. And so I'm like, I'm not even going to get out of the country, basically. And they rerouted that flight, so I'm headed south to go south, which sort of makes sense. So things look like they're working. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll be headed out, or tomorrow morning I'll be leaving the house, and for the next couple of weeks, I'll be teaching in conferences, family conferences, pastors' conferences, at a seminary, and my contact keeps throwing little things. Hey, could you prepare a message for this too? Hey, what about this? Well, could you do? One of our guys might have COVID. Could you be the main speaker of this other thing too that he was the main speaker of? I'm like, oh. So I'm going to have a lot of fun over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be right there. It's going to be, but something that we do want you to pray about. Some of the topics that they've asked me to teach on are very controversial in their country. Some theological topics that really get a lot of pushback. And one of the reasons that they're asking me to teach these is to train the seminarians, teach these pastors and families the biblical perspective on this, so that then they can spread that out better. Brazil is a hot spot for COVID. I've already had it, so I should be safe. But it is a hot spot for COVID, which means that the government does have some authority to lock down areas. And he messaged me yesterday and said, please pray. We've had other conferences, and they have not messed with us, not bothered us at all. But this is one of those things. They said every conference is packed full. And this is one of those things, especially given these controversial topics, that the enemy, we have a spiritual enemy who influences human government. And pray that they do not decide that this is the time that they're going to go ahead and shut this down, because of the spiritual impact that we could be having there. So if you would remember that, we would appreciate that. But where I want to go with that, that's sort of the rabbit trail there, but where I want to go with that is that this is not an Oak Tree Community Church mission trip. This is a Daniel mission trip. This is what I do with my ministry. And I want you to have your own ministry as well. Doesn't have to, you don't even have to name it like I've named mine. You don't have to travel all over the place. But the fact is that every single one of us has a sphere of influence. We have people around us with whom we connect that we influence. And that right there is your ministry. It doesn't have to have Oak Tree's name on it. It doesn't have to be, a church-sanctioned, sponsored, centralized thing. Because if you have an ability and you have a gift and you have a talent and you have a sphere of influence, it starts at home and then moves out from there. That's your ministry. That's your ministry. Just as much as serving our local church here or your local church if you're online and you're not a part of Oak Tree, wherever you serve. But every single one of us has a sphere of influence. And it could be a big sphere, it can be a small sphere, it doesn't matter. Where God has placed us, right there, the people with who are around us, that's our ministry. And so I'm going to Brazil. You're like, I'm never going to go to Brazil. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter if you step 1 foot out of this country. It doesn't matter if you don't step a foot out of the state or the city. You have a sphere of influence. And I want you to use that. I want you to engage with your sphere of influence. That's your ministry. So, community engagement. And that is not just church-sponsored, church-sanctioned, it's got to be Oak Tree. Just each of us serving in the ways that we can. Easter coming up this year, by the way, is only, what do my notes say? 9 Sundays away. Because Easter moves, so we have to remind everybody when it is. Easter is 9 Sundays away. And one of the things that we wanted to do was have a service that, people like to come to church on Easter, right? So have a service that we can invite people to, have an event. We're going to need help. Again, I said, 2021 is going to be an all hands on deck. With the trunk or treat, Sarah Lynn and Terry and Michaela and several people, right, were involved in helping put that together. I don't know who's helping with the Easter thing, but it should be everybody. So if you would like to be a part, we were talking about a breakfast of some kind. We're talking about Easter egg hunt. Who knows? I'm not in charge of it, is what I'm saying, okay? I have a very important role that morning. I'm going to open the Bible and teach the Scriptures, right? I'm not going to organize the rest of the stuff. So talk with the people who are, figure out who's going to organize that. And we've got 9 weeks. And I want everybody to be involved with that, okay? Even if you're not involved with, an Easter egg hunt or a breakfast or whatever, you are involved with inviting people, sharing the gospel and inviting people to Easter service. Everybody can invite somebody to Easter, okay? So talk with them about that. All right, finally this morning, our last point before we get into what specifically are you going to do? One of the things that we're looking to do this year in 2021 is expand our elders team. Now, we went from 3 elders to 2 elders a couple of years ago when my good friend and mentor Ben Knoll resigned and floated off to the promised land and sunshine and palm trees of Florida. And I was down there a couple weeks ago, got to have lunch with him, had a good time talking with him about his family, about my family, about our church, and it was a really good time. But what has happened over the last couple of years is that we've missed that extra voice. We've missed that extra perspective that comes along with having a team of elders. And so we're looking to expand our elders team. Specifically, we're looking for someone who can take that lead position on community engagement and outreach for the specific, the church centralized things. And we know we've been lacking that, and that's why we need that. We're looking outside of the church for somebody to help us in that way, and we need that. Could also be looking, or could also use someone to help us with more inside member care and some of those things in direction as well. So the reason we're looking outside again is new vision, new perspective, fresh blood, that type of thing, and to help us move in that direction. So What can we do? What are the applications? What are the big takeaways as we move forward? So again, as I've already said, 2021 is going to be an all hands on deck. There's not going to be. We need everybody to participate, and I don't know what that looks like for everybody. Obviously, we have our home schedules and our work schedules in addition to everything else. Obviously, right now there's still some restrictions. Some of you are not leaving your houses, and I get that. But working toward what we can do together, everybody unified together, working to 70 and beyond, right? We've got 10 months left to get to 70. And then what's next? I don't know. But we're looking for all hands on deck. We want everybody to be part of that. Again, we're looking forward to big anniversary celebration this fall. Hopefully come back to some stick around Sundays. One of the things last year that I did announce is that we were planning on having regular stick around Sundays last year, where we stick around after the service, have lunch, games, just talk, and that goes back to bullet point number 1, the COVID effect, right? Right? So that shot that. So we'd really like to, and again, I'm not a prophet, so I have to repeat this. In 2021, we'd really like to do more of the stick around Sundays and more just church family events. We'll see how that works out. We're excited about new faces. We're excited about fresh voices. We're excited about increased ministry opportunities in our personal spheres of influence. It's one of the things that I'm excited about for 2021. And for the past so many years, I'm like, this is what we want to do, and this is what we're going to do. And then 2020 hit. I'm like, okay, so maybe this is what we would like to do, and we'll see what actually happens. That's the theme for 2021. This is what we would like to do. But as new people come to our church, new voices, fresh faces and voices and perspectives, and we just grow together as we expand our ministry in our ministry opportunities, in our personal spheres of influence, expand what we do as a church inside and outside of the church body. Really excited about that. And so here's the big question. Here's the big question that wraps us up this morning. Here's the question I want you to ask yourself. In what ways can I intentionally and actively? I love those two adverbs, intentionally and actively. I put those because it's one thing to say, what ways can I be involved? And then not really do anything. We wake up one morning, it's like we're halfway through 2021. Wake up and all of a sudden we're to our big anniversary and I haven't really done anything. We haven't really done anything. By the way, in order to have a big celebration, an anniversary celebration, that's going to be all hands on deck too, right? Everybody, so we're going to need people planning and, doing all this stuff. So it's not just, what could I do? But it's what can I do? What am I going to do intentionally and actively to be involved, to help us grow to 70 and beyond? And I don't know what that looks like for everybody. And again, you don't have to have permission. You don't have to say, well, could I do this or this? I don't care what you do. I really don't. As long as it's biblical, moral, ethical, legal, we should probably put those on. But as long as it can be pleasing to God, if you've got an opportunity, take it. Take it. I've pointed these out. We've got the cards. We've got the Gospels of John. You can share the gospel. You can invite people to our website, to our YouTube channel, to our Facebook, to all of the social media, different things. Just get people connected. Talk about it at work. Talk about it at school. Talk about it wherever you are. And just say, hey, I love our church. And I don't know why we're still here, but God must have something pretty cool planned. And we get to be a part of that. And then throughout the year, be praying for, God, what is it that you are blessing that we can go ahead and tap into and just work with your stream? Work with your stream. Remember, Psalm 1:3 says you'll be like a tree planted by streams of living water. We don't have to make the stream. It's already there. God is already working in ways that sometimes we can see, sometimes we can't see. You say, if He's gifted me in a certain way, if He's given me abilities and talents, I'm just going to do that. because apparently he knows better than I do, right? And so we just plug in, what way or ways can I be intentionally and actively be involved to help us grow to 70 and beyond? That's a pretty cool thing. We've got an entire year ahead of us, or almost an entire year ahead of us, to get to our anniversary in November. And I'm looking forward to standing or sitting or whatever we're doing at that anniversary and saying, 70 years, that's a really good start. What about the next 70? Who knows? Who knows? I'm not going to say what we're going to do, because we see how well that works. I'm going to say what James said in James chapter 4. If the Lord wills that we live, which is really interesting as he said that. If the Lord wills that we live, then we'll do this and that. And so that's physical. If the Lord wills that we live physically this year, then I'm going to do this and that. If the Lord wills that Oak Tree Community Church lives this year, then we're going to do this and that. Ultimately, because we make it our ambition to please Him. And that's what we care about. And so, that's where we're at. That's where we're headed. Gary and I are always available for questions and comments, your feedback and everything. May not always respond right away, but we'll always get back to you eventually, as quickly as we can, especially if it's a text or an email or a message or something. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And we love to hear your thoughts. We love to hear your plans. We love to hear what you're doing, your stories. You say, hey, I had this ministry opportunity and I took it and I ran with it and this is what happened. Even if somebody doesn't become a member of our church because of it, remember, we're just one piece of a much larger project, a much larger puzzle. And so we do the best we can with what we have, and we let God decide what the puzzle is supposed to look like. Okay? That's what we do. So that's where we're at. This is why I'm excited about it. This is why I'm excited. I don't think we're done yet. I think that we have a long way to go. And I don't know how God views us. I don't know if He views us as this big old oak or if He views us as a tiny little sapling still sticking out of an acorn. I don't know. We're just here doing our thing to the glory of God, to the best of our ability, and let Him take care of the details.